Hello, it's your EN112 instructor again, and here I am with some explanation to help you better understand this PowerPoint and your causal analysis essay, which I assume everybody has been working on for a while. So the first question is, why are we writing causal analysis essays, and how are these essays different from other types of essays? I can't help noticing as I read your assignments that many of you still think in that kind of pattern of pro and con writing, which is fine if you write persuasive or argumentative essays or even a position paper, but in real life, and especially in professional and science writing, it is more typically about causal analysis, and the more typical question that we ask is, why is this happening? What causes this? Or what are the effects of that? So on this page, you can see a list of typical topics for college classes, not necessarily English classes. It could be history, economics. And as you can see, all these questions are not really asking you to argue, but they ask you to find information about causes and effects. So one example is, what are the consequences of the greenhouse effect? Why do people smoke? That's an interesting research now that everybody knows how bad smoking is, and so on and so forth. Now, what is a causal relationship? There is a very simple example, and the explanation in Moodle also told you that the most typical cause-effect explanations happen in nature and in the physical world. In other words, if somebody pushes the domino, we know for sure that it's going to fall down. Now, how do we know that the push causes the dominoes to fall down? That's very easy. Everybody can set up an experiment, and you can try to push it and see if it's going to fall down, and try to ask someone else to push it, and so on and so forth. So basically, every time somebody tries it, and it does not matter who sets up the dominoes, if somebody pushes the first one, the line of dominoes will fall. So we can safely say that pushing the dominoes causes them to fall. Now here is another question, and somebody would want to know, why is this child having a temper tantrum in a grocery store? Now, most parents wish that we would have an answer just like the domino, that, oh, if we do this, then the child is going to have the temper tantrum. But more typically than not, we really don't know the reason. It doesn't mean that there is no reason, but there is a more complicated reason. So first, the separation of causes and effects is important. For example, sometimes it's not so easy, and when that is the case, then we are encountering the so-called reciprocal causes. For example, we might easily say that lack of physical exercises might be one of the causes of obesity, but can lack of exercise also be the effect? Definitely, because obese people often say that they do not exercise because they are too fat and cannot move without inconvenience. So this is the reciprocal cause. Many of you in your homework assignment did not get this right, and I don't know, why don't you Google or why don't you look up words if you are not sure what reciprocal means? For example, the word was also used in the Kimmerer essay. Now, before you start writing, you have a topic, and suppose somebody is writing an essay on obesity, and you want to decide, am I writing about causes or effects? Now, if the question clearly asks you to write about causes, then you have to focus on causes. And in either case, it's a good idea to brainstorm. So you can make a brainstorming list: what causes obesity, not enough exercise, food with too many calories, too much food, stress eating, depression eating, government subsidizes bad food, and people tend to eat that. It could be genetic or inherited, and medication might have a side effect, or some illnesses come together with obesity. So once you have a list like this, then it's easier to start your research, because you type in Google like too much food causes obesity and see what comes up. The same way, if you are doing analysis on the effects, then you can create a list. I just show you, and then do the research the same way. So how to approach cause and effect analysis? Well, if you read chapter 5, it has some suggestions, like don't jump to conclusions, like don't think that you figured it out, like why children turn into bullies or what causes temper tantrums, for example. Some questions are not easily explained. Appreciate your limits. You are not writing a book. Some problems are naturally complex. If you don't have enough information or if you are not sure, then don't include it. But if you did a good brainstorming, you should have enough material to work with. Offer sufficient evidence for your claims. So, for example, if you want to say that broken families tend to cause bullying or tend to raise children who are more likely to be bullies than children raised in healthy families, then you must support this point. Don't just think that, but find some sources, statistical evidence. Was there a survey? Did they interview bullies? So how do we know that this is true? Avoid faulty analysis. So don't attribute causes where there are no real causes. Just because something happens after another, there's no necessary causal relationship. And here are some examples that I don't want to go into so much detail to save time, but for example, do guns really cause violence? Well, everybody knows the adage that guns don't kill, but people kill. However, is that really true if you think about it? You know, if it's way too easy to access guns, that at least even if it doesn't cause violence, but it definitely might be a contributing factor. Now, here are the types of causes that you were asked to examine in your homework and give examples. Necessary cause is chlorophyll is necessary for photosynthesis. Fanaticism is necessary for terrorism, otherwise it's just a mass murder if there is no political or religious extremism behind it. Sufficient cause in legal terms, drinking alcohol while driving is enough for your arrest. Precipitating cause is when one small thing leads to another, like Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat in 1955 in Alabama led to the civil rights movement. Proximate causes are the causes that meet the eyes. So student plagiarizes, student fails the class. But the remote causes take this one step further, and I might want to ask the question, so why did that student plagiarize? And there are very many and different reasons. You know, student has too many jobs, takes care of sick parents, didn't have enough time and copied an assignment. Or the student went for vacation in Cancun, didn't have time to finish the assignment. These are very different causes. Reciprocal causes, we already discussed that they go both ways, and the cause and the effect is hard to separate, like the case of stress and obesity. That obesity can cause stress, but stress can cause obesity by making people eat more. Contributing factors is a good term to use because when we have a complex issue like school violence, then we are not going to find what causes school violence. But there are several factors, so your paper should write a paragraph about each. How do guns contribute to school violence, or divorced parents, or video games, or bullying, or we might also mention mental health issues. Now let's talk about the trickiest of all causes, which is correlation. And correlation is not causation, but it is often used in social sciences studies. So remember the domino example and the temper tantrum. With the domino, we have a simple case, we can test it, we can examine it. With the temper tantrum, it's not so simple. So that's where correlation comes into play. there are some correlation studies that do not make any sense. So for example, somebody who has a lot of free time on their hands created this correlation chart between organic food sales and autism, and they found a very high correlation. Now, does it mean that autism causes a rise in organic food sales? Absolutely not. Or does the rise in organic food sales cause autism? It doesn't make sense. So in other words, like correlation is often used to establish some mild form of causation. There has to be some other evidence than the correlation. The name for this kind of correlation is spurious, and spurious means that it really doesn't make sense, even though it looks like it should. Just a reminder that statistical correlation is not just correlation. In fact, every study about human behavior, learning, early childhood education is based on correlation studies. There is no method that works 100% with every child. You better know that. And it's not just the human or behavioral scientists, but I have news for you. There is no medication that is 100% effective. So if there's a high enough correlation between taking the medication and improving a certain health condition, then the Federal Drug Administration considers that medication effective and we can have access to it. But there's no medication that works 100% with everybody. It's still not like the domino effect. So what is a coincidence? A coincidence, here is one funny example. Is this a coincidence, or is it really true that men cause all the problems in women's life? And this one was actually a real case. That two inmates in 1903 were found to have the same name and the same look, and they were still two different persons. And because of this case, they started using fingerprints to better identify individuals in criminal justice. Now, here is a last reminder. So if you look at chapter 5, it actually helps you structuring a causal analysis paper. Again, use a good introduction. We talked about it so much, and I pointed out that this short video, there's under 2 minutes. The author of the video actually covers everything that an introduction should cover before it presents the thesis, and its thesis has 4 dangers or 4 negative effects, and each is discussed in detail. So please use that model and follow this when you prepare your outline, and I am looking forward to reading exciting causal analysis papers from you. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to send me a Moodle message.